So it's fallen on me this morning to kickstart our local history, and no better place to start for me personally is over at Borras Quarry. This place is quite close to my heart. Goes back to when I was aged 8, 9. My father used to take me out there because he's an RAF historian. So Borras has been very much in my blood since the early days of been growing up in Cargurley, which is where I'm from. And he kept a very watchful eye on the work that we did there over all these years. And so I'm going to dedicate this talk to him because I lost him last summer. He's been with me all these years. So it's quite fitting that I get to talk about how we came to be there. And very much back in 2007, we, as was Clwyd House Archaeological Trust, were asked by Tarmac to undergo, the planning authorities asked Tarmac to undergo, prior to development of the site, a recording of all the wartime environment, because it was a battle station airfield in the 1940s. And so we were there as archaeologists recording all the buildings and everything around the area. So that was quite a good, from age of 8, suddenly found myself there in 2007 recording RAF buildings was quite a thing for me. Certainly excited my dad. 2008, things all changed dramatically for us, and from looking at 1940s buildings and air raid shelters and such, we were presented with something that looked akin to Apollo 11 had just taken off on the outskirts of Wrexham. So here we are. So this all started really back in 2008. I say at this point, with the exception maybe 1 year, we have been there as an organisation every year since, working for Tarmac or Breeden. Apologies for the very antiquated map there, but hey, I've been using this one for quite a while, so we'll stick with it. So that little red star sits right on top of Holt Estate, which is what it's affectionately known as. You can see the sand and gravel pit, which is there. Those of you, I thought I'd use this one just so you'll get your bearings of where this site is. Regards Wrexham, if you're not from around here. So Gresford up the top there, the outskirts of Wrexham down the bottom, Acton, and then we have the sand and gravel pit there, which was the old RAF battle station during the 1940s. So they were expanding the quarry into this area from around about 2007 and 8. And one of the things I'd like you to have a look at straight away is this. This black and white photograph was taken in the late 70s, early 80s, and that's looking down on the Holt Estate as was. You can just about see the quarry over here, there, sand and gravel. And one of the things that strikes you, if you look closely at that landscape, it's useful to see it in black and white because it kind of shows it a bit better, is you can see all these lakes up and down, one there. Oh, sorry. Those of you who know the area will have heard of the Gresford Flash. One there, and then one over here. And lots of little areas in and around there. They're called kettle holes. It almost looks like the surface of the moon. If you can imagine, if you know the area around Shropshire, think of Ellesmere, all those lakes. Well, imagine a similar landscape up here on what's known as the Wrexham Delta. And you've got these characteristic big domed, dried up, most of them are dried up now, kettle holes as we call them. They're formed, I am told, during the glaciers as it's retreating, the icebergs are sort of corkscrewing and melting down, and all the sediment that's in that ice forms in the bottom of these big grooves, and it almost like pond lines it, so it then holds water. If you break through that clay, the water disappears and it just dries out. So some of them still hold water to this day, and others don't. So if you can imagine 5,000 years ago, that's a picture of a kettle hole up in Delamere Forest. From the paleoenvironmental work that we've had done in the area around here, we know that up on the Borras plains there, it was very much grassland and open heath. So less of the evergreens all around there, but you certainly got this really rich environment, these pools and ponds in that area. So looking forward, 2014. I've chose this photograph just to give you an idea of the extent of the works. quite some time into where, once we were there on site in 2008, and our whole journey started down in this corner here, and we've been working our way around the quarry. The idea is, as they expand the quarry, we as archaeologists go in and we watch them strip off the soil, not with trowels, but with very, very big trowels, anything from 25-ton machines to, on one occasion, I was monitoring a 55, 60-ton machine, and blink and you get it wrong. So it really was a case of taking topsoil off, taking subsoil off, down onto the sand and gravels. We try and mark anything that we can see and deal with it in a watch and brief situation. If it starts to escalate, then obviously you bring your team in to deal with it. So we worked our way all the way around the quarry. And to this day, I mean, we were working quite recently with my colleague Carl McCrow out there. That's kind of an idea of the landscape. Monera Mountain in the background there, for those of you who know the skyline. You can see just there, there's one of the kettle holes. We're just on the lip of it there. We're watching these machines clear all this off and then marking up what we find. Just a quick reminder why we were there in the first place. A Stanton air raid shelter that my colleague Richard Hankinson discovered on day one of the watch and brief. We're putting the conveyor belt in, or we went, they were, across the road to get onto Holt Estate, and boom, last one out, switch the lights off. It literally was how it had been left, and that's how we found it. It's an incredible thing, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So moving on. So there's our kettle hole there, and here in the front of you, the landscape, it's really quite a harsh environment. The archaeologists who've worked up there with us over the years can testify to the wind never goes away. There's a reason why the RAF were there. It's got its own microclimate. It's incredible. We can be working there in all weathers, and you can see Monera Mountain disappear, but we are fine generally. It's just that wind. It's like being at the seaside all day. And it dries everything out, so it makes it really hard to even spot anything. So 2008, this turns up. And here we've got about a metre, just over a metre wide group of fire pits. Fortunately, I'd been working with Gwynedd Local Trust just before I came here, and I'd seen some of these out in Anglesey, so we knew pretty much straight away we were dealing with something prehistoric. The concept of them is, let's just move on. Here we've half sectioned one. We've now come to know them as Neolithic cooking pits. We've had them dated. They date to around about 3,500 to 2,500, something like that. And they generally don't have any artifacts in them. You've got a layer of stone underneath. You have the fire's bed, which is usually some sort of slow burning bit of oak that you find ash and other things to start fires with. You get a bed of really slow burning material. They put rocks over the top of it. They're not being very selective about that. A lot of these rocks look like they've just blown up like a hand grenade, so they're not pot boiling rocks in any way. And then you put in food, some sort of food source that you're cooking underground, and then you seal it with soil and turf and steam it. It does work. I've tried it out in my fields in Glenkirriog, and it's perfect. It's so we were pretty much sure that that's what we were dealing with. So you're seeing the bottom part of the oven. Now, having spent a number of years now looking at these, convincing ourselves as archaeologists this is what they are. They're cooking pits. They're cooking pits. 2017, just winding forward, I spent some time in New Zealand, and whilst in Auckland, I went to the National History Museum, and I came across this. And there is a great tradition in Polynesia of the umuti cooking pit. This is what they're calling it. And there they are slow cooking what they call the cabbage tree, but they also cook meat and things and such these things. This dates back to the Neolithic. They're doing it out in New Zealand and Polynesia, and they still are to this day. They lay the fire bed exactly as we were coming across. I happened to be just searching through some archaeological papers from New Zealand yesterday and came across that 1970s drawing, which I've put up there, of a cross-section of an archaeologist telling you how to identify cooking pits in New Zealand, in the South Islands, which is incredible. And that My colleague Carl will attest to this. That looks a bit familiar, doesn't it? Very much so. You've got your fire bed, your rocks, and then your soil over the top. What we don't get is the rim on the side that they get over there because it's less intensive, the agriculture farming out there where they're finding these. But it just goes to show that this is something that is transferring itself across the world. Back here now at Borras. So that's the environment we're working in. The cooking pits, we very quickly realised, don't actually have anything in the way of artifactual evidence. They are just that, they're cooking pits. But as we discovered, cleaning around the area, you start to look for differential drying and you start to spot the less obvious features. And a bit like as I was reading from New Zealand yesterday, they had a similar thing out there. All their artifactual evidence was in little borrow pits around the cooking pits. So they were getting extra soil to seal the oven, and then you'd get bits of pottery and things in those other features. So we had a big clamour. Dave Matthews is in the audience here. You'll remember this. Everybody wanted to dig a cooking pit because that's where we'll find something. And then you very quickly realised it was the more discreet things, which is where the archaeology was. Incredibly difficult to find in that environment. If you see, we've got a display out in the display area today, and you'll see the pottery that we're finding. It is literally like trying to find a hobnob biscuit that's dried up in a very harsh environment. And that gentleman there is uncovering a Middle Neolithic pot. I brought that one with us today. It all started with this piece. This was the very first piece of Neolithic pottery that we found. Peterborough ware, which is where it was first identified. I really tried over the years to change this to Wrexham ware. Still pushing on that one. Peterborough ware has various different types of subcategories of pottery. It's assigned to the mid and late Neolithic. There you can see the date. Impressed, because impressed ware, not because it's impressive, well it is. It's bird bone decoration that you've got there. That's the rim of a very large pot. There's about 250 fragments of that particular vessel. I've just got the rim there, as you can see. Round bottoms. All the pottery from this period is all round bottom. There's no flat bottoms to it yet. That's come in. There's another type of pottery there. This is the Ebbsfleet, which is slightly older. This is pretty much the oldest pottery that we're finding. If I was to say to you, to put this into context, as an archaeologist digging commercially through the year, you're lucky if you find half a dozen pieces of pottery, unless you land on something of Neolithic style. We've got over 2,500 pieces of pottery. Most of that was found within the first 2-3 years of digging at Borras. It's probably the largest collection of Neolithic, late Neolithic and early Bronze Age transitional material in this region. It's an incredible collection. That's the Ebbsfleet pottery there. Looks a little bit like, to any Romanists out there, it's a bit like black burnish ware, but on a much larger scale. And the size of these vessels are almost like cauldrons. Until recently, most of it's undecorated, the earlier stuff that we have, and I've brought it with us today to see. You'll see some cord decorated Ebbsfleet, which I'm told is extremely, extremely rare. We've only got the one vessel, which we've got quite excited about. So moving on from the cooking pits and the associated pits that we're finding material in. This is one of my colleagues, Sophie, excavating what we're calling them domestic pits, purely because we have no other way of identifying what they are. They're not for cooking. They're just associated pits on the side. Whether they're borrow pits for more material to seal the oven up, I don't know. But this is where we're finding the artifacts, whether it be little flints, leaf blade, arrowheads, things like that, little tools. But the majority of the pottery is coming out of these domestic pits. And there you can see. I put that little photograph up on the top there. So you've got a box there with Neolithic pottery in. And if you look beyond the box at the environment, again, you can see it's incredibly difficult to spot. And it takes quite a while to harden out and dry so that you can transfer it off-site. You can just see there, that's an Ebbsfleet, fragments of an Ebbsfleet pot being uncovered. Other ways that we were able to identify and look for these sites, because I mentioned to you about the wind, how it dries everything out. Round about 10:30, 11 every day, you get onto the site and you can't see anything. So you've just got little ways of spotting where everything is. One of the things we noticed, you start getting a little black ring around of little, what looked like just bits of dust knocking around. And actually what it was is hazelnut. They were roasting on quite a scale hazelnut, which is a form of carbohydrate, protein, and also makes excellent kindling because it's got like an essential oil in it. So we found that this was kind of like a signal where to dig. X marks the spot where the hazelnut is, and it became it repeated itself. Rather frustratingly, not this year. I say, smiling at him over there. But until this point, I'm still convinced Carl doesn't believe me. This was the way to find these pits. You just get boxes and boxes of burnt hazelnut. They're collecting it. They're roasting it. If you roast hazelnut, it doesn't get that virus in it where it's poisonous to you. And you, like all nuts that are roasted, you can carry them around with you then through the year as a season. So it's a secondary form of food that they're using. And then we noticed that it does actually, it's a fantastic firelight as well, just goes up in flames. So we wondered whether they were using it as fire starters, as a byproduct. So again, while I'm talking about that, let's just focus on the type of people we're talking about here. Middle to late Neolithic, nomadic. They're moving through the landscape. They're following the food source, the livestock. They're not settling down in settlements. Not that we're seeing at Borras anyway. So you're not finding structures as such, settlements or communities. This is just something that's being revisited. Something to think about is that this has been happening at Borras for 5,000 years or more, and they've been coming through this landscape to the same place for over 2,000 years or more. I kind of like to think it's like Glastonbury Festival. They're going to, let's go to Borras again this year. You know, I don't know what's up there, but that's where they're going. And so that's the type of people you're looking at, and you're not finding post holes and structures associated with the Neolithic, or so we thought. 2014, we came across these kind of banana. It's not a very impressive picture. Take my word for this. This is exciting. This is like a banana-shaped thing in the ground with a hearth over to one side and some more of the domestic workshops. We found 2 or 3 of these, and we find post holes in the bottom of them. They're always like, I like to call them like Ray Mears shelters. That's about as good as it gets at Borras, really, with regards to the Neolithic. And they are definitely sort of middle Neolithic in date. And they always have a series of post holes in the bottom of this banana shape with a hearth and then some working pits associated with them. Very difficult to spot. You see lots of rogue ones, which you think they're not actually, they're red herrings, they're real. So you end up digging a lot of this stuff only to find it's not what you hoped it would be. There's another one there. You can see the banana shape on the left-hand side, the hearth up by the scale, and then some working. They take the same pattern again, about 5 meters across in diameter. Moving on. So the other archaeology. Where's the Bronze Age? Well, there, my friend there, colleague, and hey, Dave, I did put the slide in. There you go. Dave Matthews is there as the one. He was with us for a couple of days back in 2008, and there he is sitting, drawing away. That's a Bronze Age pit, domestic rubbish pit that we found. Kind of appeared like that. So by about 11 o'clock every day, those kind of things just disappear. So you only see that because of it's holding water, and then it's gone. When you finish digging them, there you go. It's incredible. So it gives you an idea. You've got so it's this early Bronze Age. So going back to this is 2000 BC, thereabouts. The pottery that we're coming out of here was phenomenal. Up on the right-hand side, we've got a little bit of grooved ware, which archaeologists get very excited about. We don't see a lot of that down here. And coming down from the Orkneys, this material. Very, very little found in northeast Wales, or even in Wales, to be perfectly honest. And it's kind of the transition between the late Neolithic and the early Bronze Age. It's a very important period where things are starting to settle down and we're going into community. On the left, some classic fingernail decorated beaker ware from the early Bronze Age. And then On the bottom there, and you'll see, do take a look at this. I brought it with me today. Is this heavily decorated material, which we thought was grooved ware at first, but Francis Lynch and Alex Gibson have since done a bit of a reverse and U-turn, and they've come up with a new category for this, and they're calling it domestic beaker. It's like a plant pot, and it's heavily decorated, very robust, thick material, dating to around about 2000 BC or just thereabouts, a bit older. And it's not funerary. It's never found in any kind of funerary use, or it's, as it says on the tin, domestic beaker. And it's a little bit older than the material that you've seen up on the left-hand side. I say we don't find post holes, but when we do, they're pretty impressive. In this environment, extremely difficult to find. Archaeologists get very excited about post holes, but it can get a little bit dull talking about them. But I wanted to show you this one, because what I really like about this is that you can, I don't know if you can all see that post pipe, as we call it. You can see the outline of the original dimension of the original post, and then the backfill. So that's there. I'm going. I knew I'd regret using this thing. There we are. There we are. There, like that. You see that? Great to actually get the actual dimension. If you're working in sand and gravel, in order to have something structural of any sort of size, you've got a bigger, far bigger hole to get such a small. That's about the diameter of a telegraph pole. They really don't survive at Borras. You don't see these things. So it was really good to get that one. And another one there. And you'll see there's almost like a lunchbox slot in the bottom of it. This is fascinating. You've got a post hole and then some kind of container underneath, which was contained a few little bits of animal bone that had been placed in the container. You can just see the outline there. To this day, don't know what that was all about, but it's in the corner of a building. And that red dot is right on the right place. There we go. Couldn't do that again if I tried. There we are. So I said there's no structures. So here we are with a 6-post structure. I got very excited about this. Francis Lynch and I were going, right, we've got a Neolithic longhouse. And in the absence of any pottery, thought, yep, Neolithic longhouse. Finally, we found one outside of Anglesey. Great. Got one over here. As you can see, that's the size of the vehicles working away in the background. Rather annoyingly, before we got there, they built a huge ramp to get up onto the top. And beyond that red and white pole was the rest of my building. And those post holes I showed you with the little post pipe in, they're just, you just can't see them in shot there, but that's where they are. They're over there. So let's turn that around. There you can see. You just don't see that at Borras at all. And I haven't seen it since, to be fair. What we got is not, or what we have, I should say, is not a Neolithic longhouse. When we had the radiocarbon dates back from it, we have a late Bronze Age, early Iron Age granary building, probably, in the background. And in the front, and where we all are now, you in the audience, that's where the Moxie truck is driving through. But I've got the front end porch of a late Bronze Age roundhouse. So rather frustrating. Winding forward, just to give you some idea again how this all looks. 2008, we start in that little corner up in the top left there. They conveniently divide, this is tarmac at the time, divide Halter Estate up into areas that we've worked in. So we've been working from left to right all the way around. I like this contour thing because you get the concept, you can see the kettle holes, you can see where those dried out ponds are in the landscape. The one under H5 was just incredible. It was like a meteorite size hole. When we first started, we did used to dig through the bottoms of them. I was absolutely convinced I was going to find a woolly mammoth or something down there. Tarmac realised what I was up to and said, we're not digging any more of that. You're not doing that anymore. So we ceased to be digging through the bottom of these things, and there we are. But as you'll see, well, we're going to come to this, they do have a reason for looking at them. So we've found ourselves all the way around here. There has been other archaeology on our journey, but I'm here to talk to you about the prehistoric. We've been coming across Romano-British field systems as we go, and then over down here, that's where our Romans are. We found the beginnings of a Roman settlement there. Quite excited about that. Unfortunately, Mossbank Farm is sitting on top of it, so it's rather frustrating. We've had early medieval metalworking over on H2 on the side there, just a hint of it. And I think that is about it. So we're coming back into the prehistoric. We've worked through H5, H4, and we're just up in this top right-hand corner now. And in that time, the quarry has changed hands. So in 2018, it was sold to Breedon. I'm happy to say that Breedon continued to support our work there, and well, they have to because it's a commercial thing. It's part of their planning mitigation that in order to continue stripping through the quarry, they have to have an archaeological team there recording everything. So they've already signed up to that, and it's a good relationship at the moment, and long may it continue. So we're continuing our expansion, following it through. There's no extent or end to the archaeology here at all. One thing I will say, focusing back on the kettle holes, a lot of the archaeology is always around the tops, just out of the wind in the slopes. So they are clearly focusing around these areas for activity, close to the food source maybe. Either way, there's definitely a relationship between the kettle holes and the Neolithic archaeology. Less so the Bronze Age, but certainly the Neolithic. So just to give you another idea, that's my little white van. I'd never get it there now. It's but on a very rare occasion, you should be able to get it right up there. Again, the red spot is in the right place. So in the background, you can see the aerial mast. That's the old Royal Observer Corps from the Second World War. Mossbank Farm, where the Romans are. And then my white van. This was curious. We'd already excavated this area in 2017. And as far as I was concerned, natural ground surface was where it was. There. That's how close we are working to these vehicles, by the way. Give you some idea of the environment. Grassford in the background, and keep an eye on that red spot. What's worrying about that photograph is the top of my red and white ranging pole is where the supposed natural ground surface is, and underneath there, while they were building another ramp, they came across all this burnt stone in a big 5-meter circle, which dates to the Middle Neolithic, 3,500 BC. So that's a burnt mound, but not a Bronze Age one. Well, we're calling it a burnt mound because at the moment, that's all I can say about it. Here's a little bit of a summary of things to date that we've had. The Neolithic ranging from that period there. It's really been important and given us a rather unique, I think, situation here from the dating point of view. We get to revisit pit group after pit group after pit group with lots of different assemblages of pottery every year, but the same style. We radiocarbon date it, and we're getting a really tight date range. I would hazard a guess that we probably got one of the best studies of Ebbsfleet ware dating in the United Kingdom, and we've managed to bring that together and refine that date for it. Less so with the Mortlake Peterborough ware, but certainly with the Ebbsfleet. So that's really important. We've been able to do that. We've probably pushed the date range of it back a bit. So we're getting burnt mound features from the Neolithic. We've also got some from the early Bronze Age, which just haven't included in there. The cooking pits, as I mentioned, our North Walian Umuti, our domestic pits. And we did find, I didn't mention this before, a rectangular structure that we dated to the Middle Neolithic with tiny little post holes in a line, 6 of them. So there was something there, but nothing on the grand scale of a longhouse. The early Bronze Age is generally identifies as rubbish pits. We had a single cremation. And then later on, we've got the roundhouse and the grain store. We've also got a Romano-British roundhouse that we found as well. So moving on. This is where we are now this year. just to finish off, 2024, right up on the top there. We've come full circle from 2008, and right where that little arrow is, let's have a look at that. So this is a drone picture that we took looking over H4 as we cleared it, and you can see Cheshire Plains in the back. That's Gresford in the background, and rather conveniently, a kettle hole full of water. So you get a kind of an idea of the environment. Now, I want you to focus. There's Carl. This area here, this is incredible. That became the focus of what we were looking at this year. Tiny little cattle hole that was dry. And by the time we'd stripped all the soil off, so we took about sort of, I would say, 0.5 metre to 1 metre overburden off the top. It had been deliberately backfilled by farming practice over the years. And when we got into it and took all the natural soil off the top, the first mistake was we got all that rain that we did in, and suddenly our kettle hole went back 5,000 years and filled up into how it wanted to be. And that's what we were left with, which was heartbreaking because we had all this archaeology that we wanted to get at. But so we pumped all the water out. But what is amazing about this site is when you look at it like that. So I showed you a burnt mound that was 5 meters wide, Middle Neolithic. All the burnt mounds I've ever worked on, they don't tend to extend more than half the size of this room, size of taking a football thing, a penalty area. And suddenly we were faced with this vast kettle hole, and all that staining you can see is just a spread of burnt stone. Top to bottom. It was incredible. We were looking at little groups of features over on the top, and in the meantime, just scratching our heads going, okay, we're outside our comfort zone here. This is something we've never seen at Borras before. So how to excavate this? No artifactual evidence, nothing to tell you what period this is. Your gut feeling is saying early Bronze Age, though in the back of my mind, I've got radiocarbon dates from smaller burnt mounds, to say Middle Neolithic. There it is again. The little black dot that you can see in the middle there is a piece of wood floating around in there. So once we cleared it, can you see it's a game of two halves, this. On the left-hand side, you've got all the cooking pits and things that we're familiar with. And then all down this side here, and you can see the ones that we've excavated are full of water, these very large industrial pits that we'd never seen the likes of before. And some of them you could see quite clearly, others were covered in all the stone from the burnt mound, the processing. It's quite on an industrial scale. Give you some sort of idea of scale of people and pits. So here we are, just half sectioning them through. There's a very happy archaeologist digging in one of these pits as well. This one less burnt, but as you can see, as you go down through, again, you get all these layers of stonework. Far bigger than anything we've been dealing with from 2008 to this present day, but very similar in looks, you think, but here the stone is inverted, so all that soft burnt material is above, and then the fire cracked stone below. At the moment, we really can't answer what exactly is going on there. We're still calling them kind of cooking pits or industrial working troughs for processing. They need a water source. They're right next to one, that's for sure. We always associate burnt mound processing with access to water, so they have got that. Anyone who wants to, I can explain and talk about that later on. I'm conscious of the time, so come and have a chat to us about it if you want me to break that down for you. Again, something a little bit more unusual. I don't know whether this is Neolithic or Bronze Age. It's going to be fascinating when we get the radiocarbon dates back, but we've never seen anything like this. Very square, almost as if it's timber lined, but there's no wood line in there to be seen, with these very purposeful post holes set in each corner and two posts either side, almost screaming out some kind of framework over the top and something going on, but it must be a processing pit of some sort. So this is how we dig a kettle hole with our big trowel. It's the only way we could do it. We had to sample it and see exactly what we were up against, get through the peat. We've never seen peat levels up there before either. It was incredible. You're on the summit of a hillside and this incredible peat preservation. Then our hearts really did start to race when this started happening. That's wood, timber, all preserved, beautifully preserved down there. We know, at least here at this point, we're somewhere near the Bronze Age or late Neolithic, because we found a couple of surface finds. One was a kind of a residual stray flint tool, but can't really hang too much on that. But again, all this activity over the last 15, 16 years, we've always had artifactual evidence to go with it. We've got the largest, biggest feature we've ever dealt with in 17 years, and nothing, absolutely nothing. And that remains to this day, I'll hasten to add. So it's all going to come down to the radiocarbon dating. What are they up to and what's going on here? This was a bit of a sample through just to check to see what we're up against and the scale of the work. I start thinking of flag fen at this point and panicking. Did we have anything structural? The guys did a sample. We went through it very clearly, looking for anything that would remotely say trackway, jetty, working platform. But we're fairly confident, aren't we? I'm looking at him and he's nodding back at me. We're fairly confident we didn't see anything structural. This is material that has either just been naturally found its way in there, or is growing up there like alder and willow. We'll have to get this identified and find out what it is. And it's just forming in the bottom of this kettle hole. No artifacts over the top of this, none to be found whatsoever. Because we were able to convince ourselves that we weren't missing anything structural, then what we did was we ripped all that material out with the machine. We gathered some of it up. We've got it all sampled. We took monolith cores, so we're going to be able to study the full sequence of a kettle hole from Borras, from glacial times all the way up through the Neolithic. So that's going to be really exciting, first time ever. So that's, you can see repeating levels of peat forming, and then clay sediments, and then more peat, and that's about as far as we could go because the water starts to come on in. We emptied out. I haven't put a photograph up here for you today, but we emptied out the hull of the kettle hole. We took it all the way down, so we're fairly confident we didn't miss anything on this occasion. So it's all going to come down to the radiocarbon dating to find out exactly how all that burnt mound industrial complex relates to the kettle hole. And then just as a teaser to us, just to finish off, you always find them on the spoil heap. A fragment of a Neolithic polished stone axe, which reminds me, I haven't put it out on the table. It's in my bag. I must come put it out there for you to have a look at. It's a good point you've put that there. Right. And what's unusual about this, I'm informed, is that you've got a polished stone axe and then it's been drilled. There's a hole gone through it. And I'm not sure whether that weakened it or whether we certainly know that the process of them putting that hole through it didn't break as a result of that. So it's either secondary use of a polished stone axe, or, as Frances Lynch has pointed out to me, in all her years studying prehistory, she has never seen a polished stone axe with a hole drilled through it, ever. So I'll just put that out there for all you lithics experts out there. Come and have a look at it. I'll have it with me later on in the foyer. And that concludes our talk on Borras this year. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I'm afraid I couldn't go into any more detail, but I think there's an awful lot to cover. And for those who've never ever heard about Borras Quarry, and probably the largest late to middle Neolithic site in northwest, certainly northeast Wales and Shropshire and Cheshire borders, with a fantastic pottery collection. The gift it just keeps giving. Thank you. Apparently, I've got 5 minutes, so I can take any questions. Be nice.
Let's think of the post on next to hole built through it. Those broken up. Have you been improvised with a little weight?
Right, I'm going to throw that out to any lithics experts out there. Loom weights in the middle Neolithic? No.
Just for why it goes through that angle, because you couldn't make an ads from it or anything like that.
No, it is it's a curious object for that reason. You've got me.
Yeah, you've been really what you install. That's the first thing you mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't really add much more to that. It's just, but yeah, that is one way you could go with this, assuming that axe has been found 1,000 years later and has been repurposed. Unfortunately for us, we just didn't find it in context. It would have been nice to have found it at least with the burnt mound material, and we could have said it maybe being reused in the early Bronze Age. We'll see. It needs a little bit of look at it. Okay. Anyone else? Oh.
With the pottery, have you analysed to know where it was made? Is it local or is it?
Good question. Right. Oxford University, we sent it off to them for a petrologist analysis, which is a fancy way of saying what's it made from, what's in there. And they did some thin sections through the pottery from me, and I sent them quite a lot of samples, clay samples from the kettle holes, because you can't make these things out of sand and gravel, so they were obviously making it from the clay that's lining. The answer came back from the specialists that everything that was in that clay material was appearing, or similar material was appearing, in all the different types of pottery, whether it be the Middle Neolithic, the Late Neolithic. So they said, yes, you could feasibly say this is Borras ware. It's been made on site. But we didn't see any evidence of manufacturing on site. I will say, right from the beginning, in 2008, the very, very first cooking pit that we dug, the very first one we dug is the only one that we found pottery in, which is that beautiful rim. So we were thinking, is this some sort of crude kiln? And then we never found pottery in one ever again. And we've dug probably about 150, 200 of these things. So that was a little bit of a red herring. But originally the thinking was that they were firing the pot in these little cooking pits, but clearly not. Okay. Yes, sir.
Is there a long-term plan for public access to the quarry? How long are we going to be digging? What are we going to do when it's finished?
Yes, there is. One of the key working practices, and it's the archaeologists that do this, not the quarrymen, is that we sort out the different soil. So when they're stripping, we go, that's good soil, that's topsoil, that goes that way. Everything else goes that way and gets, even the stuff with all the grit in, they repurpose it and they put it through the plant. All that topsoil material is being stored all around the quarry with the very same, and they are still doing this now. They are actually reconsolidating. So as they move through the quarry, what you couldn't see in those pictures is they bring all that topsoil back, put it back to pasture, good pasture. And there were plans that I saw back in 2008, 2009 of opening it up as a park area with trails and things, and there's lots of excited ideas about this way for the Neolithic, this way for the Bronze Age, this way. There's even talk of having the fin of an aircraft with a RAF roundel on it, because one of the things that we've been constantly in the back of our minds is, as I grew up, I got plans in the office showing 70 or 80 crash sites all around Wrexham. We know specifically of one that we're very close to. So part of the whole trail was even including the Second World War history. So there was these plans, yes. Whether that is still the case, I don't know. All I can say is it will be put back to farmland that will then reopen public footpaths. Okay.
Do the sand people sieve the sand before they put it in bags and sell it to people or whatever they're going to do?
No. So when you're buying stuff from B&Q, double check. Sorry.
So bits in. I just wondered what they did with all the bits.
Well, the Borras Quarry Holt sand and gravel is famous for its quality and range of sand and gravel. During COVID, quite a few of the local quarries around us up on Holcombe and places like that, they kind of went to the wall and closed down. Wrexham Quarry managed to stay open because of the pure high grade sand and gravel they got, and they split it down into myriads of different products. Breedon have taken that the next step forward. They've invested what Tarmac didn't do, Breedon are doing, and they've invested a few £1 million in upgrading their plant so that nothing gets wasted. They're actually going back on site and reprocessing our spoil heaps and extracting more material, so you're getting different fine gravels, the stuff you put on your driveways, all manner of different products that are coming out of that quarry now, not just fine sand. Okay, I've had the nod. That's my 5 minutes gone. Thank you very much. You've been very, very attentive.